This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Dish.
I'm Lois Coatney, and I lead the development of a new collaboration platform.
I'm Jeanne Cuff. I implement tools to help customers understand their digital environment.
And I'm Julie Fernandez. I work with clients trying to improve all aspects of their HR and people development.
We're a group of women who work for a global digital firm, ISG, and we've created a new podcast, Digital Dish, which explores what it means to be a woman in the digital world.
Our goal is to create a space for women's voices and experiences in digital.
Today, I have an interview coming up later with Tammie Pinkston. I really like the idea of what Tammie is talking about, because she's talking about the things that we started this podcast to talk about: how to get women more involved in digital, how to build the skills, and how to build our confidence in it. Tammie talks about 4 things that I think are great. Is 1, know your personality type. She talks about EQ, orientation and tolerance for ambiguity, and locus of control. So those are the things that I think are really great.
Yeah, and I'm excited, just listening to the personality type. She went there pretty quickly and just makes me think of, we've all probably taken or heard of these Myers-Briggs self-evaluation things. The Marcus Buckingham Company has one that's really good as well. And what better time to be like reassessing who you are and what's important to you and how you function well and when and where you're a high performer than, to think about yourself and your personality type. So that I think is fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think she does. She has a lot of great ideas, and you're right. Now's a great time because, frankly, the way that we're all working is different, right? The way we work with each other, the way we, the companies are starting to evaluate the best working styles and ways to communicate and to, get the best of folks. I think, now's a really good time to do a little bit of self-assessment and figure out where you fit in that mix.
Right. And, the thing I like, too, is EQ. The emotional IQ is such an interesting topic, and I think it's not been really dealt with. I took a course on it when I got my master's, and it was so interesting to see who was high on the EQ and who was really low on the EQ. But I find that women really, I think we make the extra step to say, okay, what's this person coming from? Where are they coming from in their point of view? And and I think it gets harder when you don't have all the body language necessarily. So I think that's also something she talks about that's really great.
Great. As type A is, I'm thinking, am I high? Am I low? What's good?
I was wondering too. I was just going to wait till we were all done, and I was going to ask Jeannie, so who is low and high?
I'm high. I'm high EQ.
I know I am, but I know I better figure out what I'm supposed to be before I say.
Okay.
Well, I'll catch you later, Jeannie, on that one.
Okay, great. I think that's it. Let's listen to Tammie and enjoy the interview. Today, I'm talking to Tammie Pinkston, Director of the Organizational Change Management Practice at ISG. I've heard Tammie talk a few times, and I'm really excited to talk to her.
I just appreciate the opportunity. There is a lot going on, so I'm sure we'll have a great conversation today.
Tammie, let's talk about tech adoption by age. What do you see from a tech adoption point of view? You had said that it's not limited to age.
No, it's definitely not limited to age, but I go back to a saying that I've known as a child: necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. And the human behavior is to get comfortable, to get complacent, to get into a situation where we have rote and, even unconscious behaviors, and we're just comfortable there. So for a lot of people to continue to learn something new, it definitely takes them out of their comfort zone. And I don't want to attribute it to age. It's really personality type.
Oh, okay.
Who's willing and interesting to learn something new. And what COVID has done is, if you want to see your family and they're not close to you, if you want to see them, you've had to figure that out from a technical solution perspective. So whether it's Zoom or FaceTime or whatever, I was talking to my mom on Sunday, and she said, guess what I did the other day? I hit this button on my cell phone, and all of a sudden your brother popped up. I'm like, yeah, that's called FaceTime. She's like, I never knew I could do that. And I said, we've been talking about that for years. You just haven't bothered to figure it out.
My mother's slightly deaf, and so we keep saying FaceTime would really help. You could read our lips. Her personality type, she's like, it's too much. I can't do it.
Yeah, it's really been fascinating. And I will also say, though, I don't want people to be hard on themselves, because those of us that work in this virtual environment all the time, I find myself struggling with when a laptop doesn't behave, or I've had this meeting in Zoom and it's worked perfectly fine. Then I have to switch to Blue Jeans or to Teams, and something happens in that disconnect and the connection. So we all get a little frustrated.
Yeah.
But again, people have done what they need to do to get that connection. And it is, and I, have watched the news and watched so many of the late night shows. We're seeing people's personalities because we're seeing their environment.
Right.
We're seeing their home, or at least what we think is their home. I think in the last month, I've seen a lot of people that have more professional backdrops, that their art departments and other, support mechanisms have been able to put in place. And we've all had to find that little corner that has a clear space that we're able to work from.
My favorite is when you put a company logo and it gets reversed.
Yes.
That's my favorite, backwards.
Yes.
We actually had a rant exactly about this in our special episode on COVID. We did a special rant. So I'm with you on this one. But I just think the age thing is really interesting. But what you're saying, it's not an age. It's really just the ability to adopt and accept change. And I think that's a really interesting concept, because it's true in any kind of organization. How fast, because everything changes all the time, maybe not at this huge worldwide level, but the change is something that people are really, really resistant to. And I think this is really having an impact for things like that.
Yes, for sure. And it is fundamental to the work we do in organizational change management. And, my colleagues and I go round and round all the time, because they're like, we need an OCM solution for digital. We need an OCM solution for automation. Organizational change management is about human behavior. And I think it was one of the other podcasts we had where we heard that our brain is trained to think 8 negative things for every 1 positive thing, right?
Yeah.
By nature, we have this fight or flight that we are born with, and it goes back through all evolution. And so in general, human beings like comfort. It's not our nature to want to change, but the orientation to change dimension is a core dimension when you look at personality types. So it really doesn't have to do with age. It has to do with age when you attribute it to your life experiences.
Right.
So as you've gone through life, if you've been uncertain about something, but you've been willing to take the risk and try it anyway, and it's worked out well, then the next change comes easier, and the next change comes easier. But if you have been in a situation where, you've had to get out of your comfort zone for whatever reason, and it hasn't worked out well, then that trains your brain differently and says, anytime you try something new, it hasn't worked out so well.
Right.
So that becomes the voice in our head. It is age, because it's a little bit of experience, but that's really just one of the factors in our personalities that allow us to thrive in strange times like this.
Well, I think that takes me to my next question about trigger points in lives where you evaluate. So this is kind of what we've been talking about a little bit, where people evaluate. You were talking about leading with self, evaluating values and things like that. Let's talk about that, because I think the trigger points are coming up for a lot of people right now. I think it's a worthwhile discussion. So what's I know you have a whole philosophy on that, so I'm not going to ask you a pointed question. I'm going to let you go.
I do have a philosophy, and I've been working on it's either going to be a white paper or a blog about this too. So I'll let you know what that is, and we can tie all this together.
We can revisit this then.
Yeah, absolutely. But leading with self is one of the core dimensions, I believe, to fundamental leadership. So when you look at the components of self, it really goes back to the Power 5 in personality, and that becomes the values conversation what is important to me. It also is made up of learning styles. So how do I take in information and interpret that information and learn from that information? The third dimension is emotional intelligence. How can I control what I am communicating and how I'm communicating, and can I interpret what others are saying, either verbally or non-verbally? The orientation to change component that we talked about a moment ago is really made up of two subcomponents. It's a tolerance for ambiguity and an internal or external locus of control. So that is that dimension. And then the fifth Power 5 dimension is core self-evaluation. Do I feel competent? Do I feel confident? Do I have the self-esteem to believe I can get through this? So if you think about all of those components in this particular time, I may be a high orientation to change. So I may not struggle with orientation to change. And I may have a locus of control that says, hey, I can pretty much control my destiny. You may have a learning style that says, I really prefer the interaction and learning by doing. And you just look at those three dimensions and you say, okay, well, I'm pretty cool with change when I know it's not going to be permanent.
Right.
And there's no end in sight. I mean, we're starting to turn the corner on the COVID-19 for sure, but we don't know what the new normal looks like.
Right.
We don't know when that's going to be unfolding. And if you look at the locus of control dimension, even though I feel like I control my own fate, again, COVID-19 has taken some of that out of my hands.
Right.
So what you begin to look at in any of these self components is, even if you're somebody that's highly resilient, that, learns by doing, and again, these aren't evaluative, these are just statements of fact. As you look at these 5 dimensions, even the healthiest, most resilient to change people are going to struggle in this type of situation because there's so many unknowns.
Right.
We can't create that new normal. So it causes people of every type to struggle. And if you're not resilient in the first place, right, you're a creature of habit. You're a little bit of a low tolerance for ambiguity. You like all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. Well, you can see very quickly how someone with that type of personality combination of traits would be struggling.
Yeah.
It's challenging, and it's challenging for all of us. The other thing that I keep reminding people is, I'm not married. I've never been married. I have no children. I have no pets. I have no plants. I have no nothing. That doesn't mean that I'm not adjusting to this period of isolation.
Right.
Right. And I'm no better off than the people that have spouses, don't have spouses. We're all in our own environment given these circumstances, and we're all having to adjust in the best way that we know how.
Well, this brings to mind a couple of things. Well, I heard an interview yesterday with a guy who wrote a book on mindfulness, and he's doing a podcast. He said basically he's using mindfulness to control his anxiety. He says, but right now, if you're not anxious, you're not paying attention.
That's right.
But I also keep thinking about the kid. Like, I have 2 kids in their 20s, and they're mid to late 20s. And I know a lot of people have that same thing. And they're the ones I feel like it's a real challenge for them. And so I'm trying to think about ways to approach, what can we say? I think this is all great information. What else do you think that would be advice or suggestions or thoughts that you would be able to share with someone who's still struggling to find their role, their place in the world, in their career?
Yeah, it's definitely very challenging times, and the statistics are concerning to me, especially some statistics coming out of Fortune magazine. An article I saw there is the young females that are 20 to 24 are really, they're behind the 8 ball. They're behind their peers in terms of unemployment right now and job seeking.
Wow.
But I think the real message here is it's about being successful one day at a time. Don't set the bar so low that you don't want to get out of bed, but also don't set it so high. Don't think you have to solve world hunger. It's really about getting to the next day. And I think if you look at it and you really are thinking about career change or first job, etc., what people don't value enough, I believe, is that you learn from every situation that you're exposed to.
Yeah.
So you may not be in the right place for the dream job at the moment, but you're learning something. You're learning something about how you work with others. You're learning something about yourself, about your preferences, and what you need to be looking for and preparing as the world begins to open up and the situation begins to change. So I think it's, don't underestimate the amount of learning and discovery that's happening in almost the everyday moments, or the job that is temporary, or the unemployment
Right.
that's a temporary state of affairs. It is getting back to the mindfulness.
Yeah.
Tune in to how you're feeling and how other things are making you feel.
No, I think that's good, that one day at a time. Let's just get through today. You don't have to be creating the vaccine. You can just deal with how to stay safe, how to keep your family safe, and then get to the next day. I think that's the only thing you can say. Yeah. All right. So I want to ask you, this is what my fun question that I ask everybody is, what you're passionate about today. I ask for rants or raves. I don't care. I'm pretty cool with either one of them. So what are you focused on? What's your passionate, or what's your rant? We already went through the equipment rant, so that gets taken off the table. Just so you know. I already ranted. I did a whole podcast to talk about that right up the front. I'm going to complain about my...
Yeah, I definitely won't go back there. But my passion for many, many years has been building awareness and making sure, and this is particularly around the young women that are coming behind me, but it really is for women of every age. And it is about building the awareness that keeps women from being as successful as they possibly can. So again, it's not evaluative. It is the fact that research shows women have significant fear of failure. Women want to be perfect. I use this example all the time, and the research says women will apply for the job or the promotion when they meet 100% of the criteria. Men apply when they meet 70%.
I thought it was 60, but you're right.
Well, it's definitely not 100, right? 100, There's another quote in a book that I love that says, women, when they're talking to them about giving them a promotion, the immediate thing they think about is, how is this going to affect the other people in my world? Will my children suffer? Will my spouse suffer? Will I suffer? I've never done this job before. What makes them think I could be successful here? So the woman is creating this dialogue and talking herself out of taking the promotion.
Right.
And the typical man takes the promotion and then figures out how to do it.
Right.
And so as female, again, it's about building awareness. It's about acknowledging that a fear of failure will keep you from doing things that you would soar in doing. Communicating differently than male colleagues, whether it's verbal, whether it's body language. We have this concept of the shrinking woman. And again, it's just about building awareness. There was a great study out of Duke many, many years ago. Their first female president led this amazing study of a cross-section of women at Duke University. And they coined this term, effortless perfection. Oh. And this whole construct about these women felt like they had to be just smart enough, just capable enough on the athletic field, just good enough looking, dressed just so. And they had to do all of these things without it looking like it took any effort. And what they found...
We all know that's not true.
No, it's not. But think about the 18 to 22-year-old woman.
Yeah, right.
Right? And think about social media and what social media has done to that construct. But these young women were entering Duke as undergraduates, as staff, she looked at the whole cross section, and she found higher levels of low self-confidence, low self-esteem, again, this fear of failure. And they came to Duke as highly talented and capable women, and they were leaving Duke with eating disorders, anxiety, stress, etc. So again, I'm a big advocate of building that awareness. Effortless perfection doesn't exist.
Doesn't.
Move on. Don't be afraid to fail. Communicate effectively. work on your story. Make sure that you can do self-promotion.
Right.
And it's not bragging. It's telling your story and the value that you bring. But as women, we want to talk about the group effort as opposed to what I was able to contribute. And that's critically important.
Yeah.
The other topic that I think about a lot is the imposter syndrome.
I was just going to say, what about the imposter syndrome? Because we talk about that all the time. And yeah.
Absolutely. And men and women both suffer from it, but women tend to suffer from it more.
Yeah.
And what I shared, and I may have even shared this on Chick Tech, I've certainly shared this on a panel recently, is I turned 57 years old next week, and I've been in consulting for almost 30 years. I still get a little bit of imposter syndrome when I'm forced into a new client, a new industry, a new situation. And I'm like, they're going to find out I don't know anything that I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden.
But you do. That's the crazy thing.
We take a deep breath, we step back, and we say, yeah, I haven't had as much experience in this industry as these individuals I'm going to be talking to, but I can bring my experience via process from all of the other industries that we've talked to and we've looked at. And again, it's taking that pause, it's taking that moment to reflect, and it's not cutting myself off at the knees before I even get started.
Yeah.
So long answer to what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about building awareness in women around the ways that we hold ourselves back, and I want it to stop.
Awesome. All right. Well, I don't think there's a better note to end this interview on. So thank you so much, Tammie. I really appreciate it. I feel like got a lot of good information and it feels hopeful. This is why I do it. I do this because I feel better. So
I understand that. I love talking about it. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks.
Well, that was I'm so glad we got Tammie to be on our podcast. You know, I've worked with Tammie a few times in ISG here, and she has such a great perspective on things. You can just tell she's worked in so many different areas with her organizational change background. She's really active in so many things just in the community and also with her sorority. And it's great to hear her perspective on, you know, what we're all struggling with, what we're all going through today, and how we manage the change that we're all going through today.
Yeah, what'd you think about, you know, age versus personality and what impacts that the most?
You know, when she said about age, about you kind of get used to it as you go through this, you know, I think I've mentioned I have a teenage daughter, and this is a big deal to her, right? She had to grapple with the change that she can't go to the job that she loves to go to and make money, even though, you know, it's a part-time job. She can't do that. And, you know, I think we've probably, over time, we've been through a lot of changes, and we recognize change is typically a short-term thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, figure out how it impacts me, how I'm going to grapple with it. And maybe that is something we gain with experience as we get older.
Sure, you have to at least be confident that it doesn't change eternally, right? And it ends at some point in time. It's stable for a little while, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you know, the thing that I really took note of is her leading with self. I thought that was talking about the change that we're all going through. I thought she had some really great things. She listed a number of things to recognize what triggers change and how we grapple with it. And I think, you know, we're all a bit struggling, no matter what our age is. You know, we are struggling through the massive change that we're all going through. And she had some really great points that she talked about in understanding our styles, you know, understanding how we react to change, you know, what our tolerance level of change is, how we also kind of self-evaluate how we get through the change, like our confidence in getting through that change. And I think, you know, as we all struggle through this, and I think, you know, even though most change is short term, this is becoming a longer term situation. But I think as we understand what maybe some of what's causing our own stress, what's causing us to feel uncomfortable about what might happen next. I don't feel like I might have control over what might happen next. Just recognizing how we're being impacted or what our characteristics are, our ways of managing or grappling with change. I think it's really important to do that kind of self-diagnosis and recognition of that to grapple with it.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's a whole spectrum of change, right? I mean, tolerance, just being able to tolerate it is one thing, but adopting it, that's, you definitely want to be there, but that kind of makes it sound like it's a one-time thing. And sometimes it is. This is hopefully a one-time large event that we have to adapt to. But then you get to resilience. And I think that you have to have gone through change and realize you come out the other side a few times in order to become resilient in some way. And then maybe, those who have been through change a number of times, you might get to the point where you feel like you can really be an agent for change and viewed as a leader of change. And so whether that comes quickly with lots of short bursts of experience, or it comes with age and experience over time, it's something you have to learn how to manage, just like any other aspect of your work life, your home life, and the world around us. So,
yeah. Well, and I think her final, I guess, rant or rave, which I love when Judy does those, when I think about the change we're going through, we all will need to evaluate, especially for women. And she had some great points about women and what we find, what keeps us from success. I think that self-evaluation and understanding of ourselves, mentoring, I think many of us are involved in mentoring relationships because sometimes we just need that outward, in looking at what we might be doing, what we might be thinking, what we feel might be a barrier to us, even though it's not potentially a real barrier. I love that. I could so relate to the story of before you go for a job, you have to 100% know that you can do it, where our male counterparts might not do that. But I think just getting that self-awareness as we're going through this COVID change, what, might lead to opportunities for us as we go through this. That's something that I think is really important for us to keep that in front of us and maybe get a little mentoring from our colleagues to help us through that.
Yeah, sure. And it actually leads you to think about a really great technique, which is if I can dominate something 80%, right? I know enough to plow through to the additional nth degree. Do I really have to prove myself out to that level in order to feel confident enough to take on, the next challenge? Or can I learn to be satisfied with the fact that I've gotten myself over some threshold or some hump in a project or in a, something I'm learning to do, to feel like, okay, I have competency in that. And I think I can, I feel confident that if I had more time, I would just carry on and finish it out to perfection.
Well, I think, maybe we all, and it doesn't matter what age you are, what you're working in, sometimes it's good to just look back and say, wow, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do this, right? If we just look back at what we've been able to accomplish, what journeys we've been on, and actually take note of, I think we called it the small steps, right, of success.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back at what you have been able to accomplish, even though they're small, really kind of give yourself a pat on the back and say, wow, look at what I've done.
Yeah. I had one other, kind of, as she was talking about her passion or her rant, I was just thinking, be successful one day at a time. The thing that struck me about that was, too many people, I think, take that passively. So you were going to be successful one day at a time or learn from every situation. Well, to do that well, you really have to push yourself outside of, being successful in your routine and those safe places or safe environments or safe audiences, and be proactive and push yourself, to do things. Many of us are seeing video conferences, right, crop up in our lives as people are forced to work from home. And we as women, we talked about, feeling like we need to prep and be all put together for those. But even so, pushing yourself to do it. I had an internal team member. We were on one of those calls, and she's closer to young than I am. She's younger than I am for sure. But she would describe herself as an introvert. And, many of us on the team were probably majority extroverts. And, she just called it out and said, this is good. I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm an introvert, but this is a safe place for me to do that. And so, maybe then you just need to keep pushing your envelope in your safe places so that if you have to do it with a client or you have to do it in a professional situation, you're more prepared and you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've definitely pushed our envelope. We're on this podcast, aren't we?
For sure.
Well, this has been really I'm so glad again that we appreciate Tammy Pinkston for joining us. And it was great to talk to you again, Julie.
Likewise. Talk to you next time.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on ISG Digital Dish. If you like our podcast, subscribe and please rate and review us. Thanks.